Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Dave Petrella. First, a couple of announcements. Our website is forbiddenknowledge.news. It's also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. That's where you find some of your favorite podcasts featured, like Raised by Giants, What the Frick Live, Understanding Propaganda, Day Zero, and many more. Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on Rokfin, Odyssey, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Social media is Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rokfin, that is where you get our premium content. You also get all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin for only $15 a month. You just go to rokfin.com/FKN Plus. That's ROKFIN.com/FKN Plus to sign up now, or click the link in the description. All our links are right in the description. Today I want to welcome back to the show Dave Petrella. He is an astrologer, biologist, spiritual guide, and Oak Island theorist. He's traveled to all 50 states and most of Canada doing research, and he has studied world religions and spiritual traditions extensively, along with Eastern medicine, metaphysics, and topics related to extraterrestrial intelligence. Dave, welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, Chris, I'm doing great. How about you?
Excellent, man. Good to have you back. Last time you gave a great introduction into astrology and how it connects to not only our biology, but many aspects of our personal and collective experience here in this incarnation. And we're going to get a little deeper into that, as well as possibly an astrological forecast for 2023 and much more. Before we get into anything, though, just remind the audience a little bit about yourself and what brought you down your path.
Yeah, sure, Chris. Well, I basically studied biology my entire life. I started off with that, and then I kind of picked up the Eastern teachings of biology. You might call it essentially Eastern medicine. It's really the Ayurvedic principles that I spend the most time with, which is out of ancient India. And then along the way, I picked up most of the esoteric topics and spiritual traditions. I still to this day, I do research every day, trying to understand the world better. And then somewhere along the line, 2015, I picked up astrology while I was actually looking for information about some of the esoteric aspects of biology. And it was proven to me through the scientific method that I could rely on it. I didn't necessarily want to do it, but I believe it was given to me as a responsibility to teach it correctly and to teach it clearly and make it accessible to people, because it's not necessarily an easy concept.
Right.
So those are kind of essentially the things I do. Of course, I have a show with Karen Holton. She's also, of course, part of the network, the Quantum Guide show that Karen's been doing for quite a while now, which is a great show. And then me and Karen have our own show called Aliens and Astrology, also on your network, Forbidden Knowledge News. It's been going great. We're going to be starting season 2 in January, so me and Karen are really excited about that. And that's where I'm at, Chris.
Right on. Well, let's get into an outlook of things that could be in our near coming future. We've got the winter solstice coming right up, so maybe we could start with that and some of the things you see surrounding this.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so winter solstice, guys, it's going to be tomorrow, December 21st. Depending on the year, it will slightly move to one side or the other. This year it is the 21st. And so what that means is that it's the day in the Northern Hemisphere specifically, it's the day that has the least amount of light. So you're going to notice, it gets dark very early. And, the sun is very low in the sky and it's very low power in terms of the radiation, like the solar radiation, UV rays. And you can see that too, because when you go outside, even if it's a sunny day, if you have, the skin of your hand or something and you have it out towards the sun, you're really not going to feel hardly anything. It's actually fairly amazing. You say, wow, it's a bright day, and you go out and you just don't feel anything on your skin because the power is so low. And so after the winter solstice, of course, well, actually, technically what happens, there's about a little bit more than 3 days typically where the sun, it's said that it doesn't move, which means that you're not losing light. You're losing like half a second or something like that. It's such a small amount that it's essentially, it's even and steady. And then it's the 25th, traditionally, when the sun actually starts to increase in the amount of light and the amount of power, and it's incremental. It starts off very slow, but that's the reason that we call the 25th the birth of the sun. The sun, of course, in Christianity, the sun is Jesus Christ.
Right.
I happen to believe Jesus Christ was a real person. Some people believe it's a metaphor. Some people believe it just has to do with astrology. There's all kinds of interpretations. But the one that's important in terms of, people are like, oh, Jesus was actually born in March or April or something, which, then you're getting to the rebirth, which is a spring equinox. So it depends on which way you want to talk about it. But the idea behind the 25th is that that's the day when you start to increase light. And you're not really going to notice it for a few weeks, to be quite honest. It's very slow in the beginning. It's like starting up like an 18-wheeler, Chris. Even if you hit the gas, if you're at a stoplight with an 18-wheeler and you're in like an economy car or something like that, you're going to pull way ahead very fast. Because it has a lot of weight behind it, which means that it takes a lot to turn the cycle around, because we've been in the death cycle for the last 6 months since the summer solstice, and now we're about to enter the growth cycle, which I should mention, it's a really good time to start projects. It's a good time to do things that are going to help with your growth anywhere between now and the summer solstice, especially from the spring equinox to the summer solstice. That's like the golden quadrant in astrology. Those are like called the luckiest signs. That's when you're going to be having the most growth, which we know that because you go outside and you see that, oh, everything's popping up. The buds are coming out in the trees. That's for the spring. But having said that, we're still in the growth season starting tomorrow, starting at the actual solstice there. So that's what's happening with the winter solstice. Of course, it comes around every year. And this year it's going to be especially potent because we have Pluto return part 3 for the United States coming up on December 28th. And most astrologers we've had our eyes on this all year. It actually started, part 1 was February 22nd, part 2 was July 11th. I know for February 22nd, that's essentially when the war between Russia and Ukraine started. It was within, a day and a half or 2 days. And I was saying it 3 or 4 weeks before. I'm like, guys, there's probably going to be a war, and based on what's going on in the world right now, there's a lot of tensions because Pluto is the destroyer, the great destroyer, and the great transformer. So it's not as if it just gets blown away and then you don't have anything that's helping you to pick up the pieces and get you back to a good place. Pluto will rearrange things and reorganize it and then rebuild it. So for part 3, oh, go ahead, Chris. Yep.
No, I was just going to ask, you have any examples you could give the audience historically of some of the events that might have happened during Pluto return to give them an idea of what we could expect from these energies?
Yeah, well, of course, the Ukraine-Russia war was the first one. July 11th, I still haven't had a chance to go back and look. I was on the road for 100 days doing research. I'm sure there was big events surrounding that. But the idea too, and we'll get into this when I talk about a little bit of a forecast for 2023, is that Pluto has a very far orbit from the sun, which means it takes a long time. Its orbit is essentially 248 years. So the first time, they're not even generational. It's much more than that. It's a much bigger time period you're talking about. So no one in the United States has seen Pluto return since the founding of the country. And that's why it's called Pluto return now, because it's based on the United States birthday, which I believe is 1776. And so essentially it's 248 years from that date, and that's where we are right now. So every time you go through that, and humans, we never get to see that in our own chart, Chris, because we don't live that long. So these are massive shifts and massive changes. It's basically Pluto returns to the same spot it was at that birth of the country, and that's what the United States is experiencing right now. So it's reorganization. It's like a steamroller. I mean, you're not going to stop it. It's incredibly powerful. Pluto is, when I teach cosmology, Pluto is in the 10th sphere, which is the last sphere of our solar system. So that's like the last guardian. That's the very last gatekeeper. So you really need to expect huge amounts of power and rearranging transformation. I'm sure there's other examples through history, and specifically I'd look for countries if people want to do some research or something like that. Look, like for instance, look when, and I know there's something going on here. I can't remember what it was because it's been a while. But like, look at the Roman Empire or look at the Greek Empire, and those are very long periods of time. So you can actually find the founding date and then figure 248 years from there, and you've got your Pluto return. If people want to look at the long history trends and stuff like that. Now this year, it's going to be especially powerful. First of all, it's part 3 of 3 for the year. And we know when you get anything 3 of 3, that's the completion event. You lead up to that part 1, part 2, part 3 is going to tie everything together and kind of like seal the deal, so to speak. In terms of it came here, it finished what it had to do, and then it's going to be headed out again. So the thing about this is that we have the solstice on the 21st. We, of course, have Christmas on the 25th, and then we have Pluto return part 3 on the 28th. So Christmas is essentially right in between this year, the solstice and Pluto return part 3. So it's the word I've been using is that it's essentially flanked. It's on both sides. The day that the sun is going to be getting stronger. So what this really means, to summarize, is that you have a new birth, because every year when the sun hits the winter solstice, you get the birth period. You have the new birth, and then in between that, you have the actual taking that into action, because it doesn't start until the 25th, technically, the actual real birth. And it sits in the tomb, the story of Jesus sit in the tomb for 3 days. This is what you're talking about in terms of astrology when you bring that into astrology. And then on the 25th, you get that actually taken into action, that birth event. And then with Pluto on the other side, it's destruction and transformation. So it's not a normal birth. It's like a birth where everything gets cleared off the table and you're totally brand new. When the sun comes around every year during the solstice, it is a new birth, but it's not as impactful necessarily on a yearly basis. You feel it. Of course you feel it. It's a big deal for the seasons. But when you're talking longer term trends, this is a birth of a new trend, a new segment of our civilization, essentially. So that's what's going on for 2022.
So you believe that we could possibly be experiencing some turmoil within the short term, which could lead to either a growth period or something better on the other side?
Yeah, definitely. It's like it's going to be turbulence either way you look at it. Mostly because, even if you had the solstice by itself, in terms of what we're going through right now, those are big deals. The solstices and equinoxes are huge deals, the 4 most powerful days of the year. So it's just going to be compounded a lot, and it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have to mean war, but it's going to mean that, like, get out of the way. Pluto's coming through, and you seriously be buckled up and be ready. We need that, Chris. We need the change. I think you would agree. We need it. It's ripe to happen. There's a lot of people on board that are ready to go. So we need, the planets will come through for us. They always do at the right time, per the cycle, per where we are in the cycle.
And all the indicators are pointing to that we are definitely headed towards something better in this change, even though it'll be turmoil and possibly hard to go through at first. It'll be better on the other end.
Oh yeah, I definitely think so, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second when we talk about 2023, because there's going to be a couple really big changes that we haven't seen in at least a few years in one case, and then the other case we haven't seen since actually the 1700s, which is really exciting. So these are big trends that you're looking at here to try to understand things. The other thing I'll mention too, before I go into 2023, is that when you have a big event in astrology, there's what's called an orb that surrounds the event, and that means essentially the days before and after. The strongest influence is within 3 days in the front or the back side of the event. So, for instance, the solstice, you want to figure the strongest influence for solstice is 3 days before and 3 days after the solstice. But you can also draw it out further, and if you go 7 days on either side, it's still a fair amount of influence. Let's say moderate influence, and then I usually take it out to about 10 days on either side. So you really have a bracket of, if you really want to extend it as far as you can really theoretically take it in terms of when you're going to really be experiencing stuff. It's like a 21-day bracket. You got 10 on one side, 10 on the other side, plus the event in the middle. So since I'm saying that, I'm also going to say that what we got, 29, 30, 31, that's 3 days plus 7. So I would be prepared through January 7th to be, rocked and stay buckled up, because we got a compounded solstice with Pluto return. And that just so happens to end essentially right in the middle of Capricorn as well, which is around January 6th, 7th, somewhere around there. So the thing about that is, you don't, just because the event passes, it doesn't mean the influence is gone. It will hang around, and it will get less as it goes on. But as you go into other signs and things, you have other things happening. There's other angles and aspects and stuff. It's always something, Chris. There's always something that's giving you different influence.
Now, will these events, do you think they will collectively affect humanity's biology and physiology and mental state and things like that?
Oh yeah, actually the entire Earth grid is being upgraded right now, and it really has been for a very long time. I mean, you could even say for hundreds of years. I had mentioned the Industrial Revolution back on the first show that we did. Then you got, like steam locomotives and combustion engines and stuff like that. That's all Aquarius stuff. When you're talking about that, you're talking about metal, you're talking about machines, you're talking about cold steel. That's all Aquarius. It's not Pisces things. So it takes a while to transition. But yeah, I mean, the etheric grid of the Earth is changing dramatically. And even the pole is drifting a lot. If people you've probably seen that map, Chris. If you've seen a map of it's shocking,
moving,
man.
like rapidly towards Siberia, and from what some researchers believe that could, if it goes far enough, possibly trigger some kind of magnetic reversal. I don't know if you've looked into that at all.
Yeah, there's at least one person I know, Frank Jacob, is talking about a pole shift in April. And, these things are massive events. I think they've happened since the creation of the Earth. It's not something that's new. But the other thing I have to say is that you really want to look at it. What I encourage people to do, we basically stay calm, stay collected, make sure you're following your heart, make sure you're doing things that are positive actions, because, we're creators. So you create based on your state of consciousness. So what I would say, just stay focused, stay in the right path. And then dimensionally, the Earth is a multi-dimensional system. And the system I teach is, again, it's actually a 21 dimension system, which is the Earth at the center, 10 heavens above, 10 hells below. And so that is impacted in a fractal kind of way. And so you experience that personally and collectively, and based on where you are in the solar system and in the galaxy and all this stuff. It's all fractal. So what I've heard a couple people talking about is that when the pole shift does occur, I believe it will. I believe it's imminent, actually. Is that it's going to happen on a multi-dimensional level, and some of those versions of Earth, some of those dimensions of Earth, there's not going to be like a destructive event. It's only going to be a positive event. The lower ones, I believe, it will be a destructive event. And depending on where you're holding your consciousness, it's all dependent on that. And there's karma that comes in to challenge that. It's not as if not everyone can just. It's not really easy for everyone just to make an instantaneous decision. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to have my heart set right. It takes work, and there's a lot of astrology that you have to get past to make that happen, depending on how you come into the Earth with your karma and things of that nature. So just stay focused. The other thing that's interesting too is that you're mentioning is drifting towards Siberia. Well, where have most of the headlines been coming from in the past for a while?
Yeah.
We're talking about Russia and China, because that's the influence is moving over there. We had our time in North America when it was close to us, up in northern Canada right now. And that's the thing with astrology and with energy and with the Earth. It's always in flux. You can't say, oh, I'm always going to have the benefit of this influence. It's not like that. Everyone gets a chance. Everyone gets an opportunity. And in the solar system and in the galaxy and then the larger systems, mega galaxies and stuff like that, it's everyone has their time at the right time.
So you think that coincides with Russia and China basically gaining more power?
Oh, yeah. 100%, man. Yeah, 100%. You see that thing moving, and you can look at the year. I mean, you look at the years and you look at like kind of the tipping point. I think it's right. I'm pretty sure it's essentially perpendicular to the actual geographic North Pole right now, the last map that I saw. So it's kind of the tipping point,
And
once
it seems
you pass
like that would have a not so good or detrimental effect here in the West, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think what it means is that we just have to be more fastidious. We really have to step up for ourselves and for our fellow men and women. Essentially, it's you can get more favor at one point, and it makes it what I would say easier. But even if it's difficult or moderately difficult, all it means to me is, because I always rise to the occasion. It's just you have to step up your game. Yeah, it's not always easy. Life's not always easy. Your conditions in your country is not always easy. But I think we have to do what we're asked to do and step up for our neighbors and our families and our communities and all this stuff. We just have to be more on the mark. Absolutely.
Right on. All right. Well, let's get into what we could be looking forward to this coming year.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'd already mentioned, the influence of Pluto return. You want to figure at least through January 7th. So just because we passed the 28th, don't think that we're past it. And even at the end of the year, we're still not past it. I'm very sensitive to astrological influences. I felt the solstice. I want to say it was at least 12 days before tomorrow. So, most of the time I say about 10 days, front or backside, but I was able to sense it about 12. It may have even been about 13 days before. So anyway, figure through about January 7th. You've got, and it's compounded. The compounded nature will start to pull away. When I say compounded, I'm talking about the winter solstice with Pluto return part 3. I would say the compounded interest will start to pull away by the end of the year. And then you're going to be the solstice will drift away, and then it's just going to be square Pluto return, not square, but it's going to be solely Pluto return influence coming into January. So it will shift a little bit. It's going to be, the solstice birth establishes it kind of sets the tone for what Pluto is going to do. And then once the tone has been set, now Pluto moves away, and it's just going to do its thing. It's going to, destroy some things and transform and reformulate. But anyway, about this through the 7th there. And for 2023, as we're standing right now, there's kind of 3 main things that I'm looking at. And I had mentioned the planets that are in the outer orbits as the ones that have they're really impactful, and they're things that don't come around often. So you're gonna feel big changes. So we do have big changes in 2023, but we're going to be. I think it's going to be a little less rocky, put it that way. And there's going to be changes in paradigms and stuff like that. So we can figure kind of that stuff going on there. Okay, so let's see. We got Saturn moving into Pisces on March 7th. And I should mention, you also want to pay attention, as an astrologer. I'm happy to do it for people. It's my career. It's what I do, obviously. These are not things, it is very mathematical. It's like very data driven. So I'm happy to just report it. You don't necessarily have to think about it more. Just listen to listen to how I'm going to kind of phrase this. So Pisces, March 7th is essentially right in the middle of Pisces, which means that it's full Pisces power. Anytime you move, towards what's called a cusp, whether you're closer to Aries or you're closer to Aquarius, it changes the influence of Pisces. So March 7th, since Saturn moves into Pisces on March 7th, it's going to be a very strong, essentially it's a full Pisces influence. And Saturn, it takes about 30 years to move through its orbit. It's called Saturn return. People have heard of that, big life changes. Essentially, it's like your first part of your life, your middle part of your life, and then the end part of your life, which adds up to about 90 years. So Saturn's moving into Pisces. Pisces, they're the wisdom keepers. They're the people that understand everyone. They're the ones that pull from the dream world. They're able to really kind of draw things in and help people to understand things at a much higher metaphysical level, esoteric level. So when you have Saturn influencing that, it's going to be the thing about Pisces is Pisces, sometimes it's hard for them to show up. They have big talk, but they really struggle to follow through, probably more than any sign. And so the thing about it is you have Saturn coming in to kind of back that up. So Saturn's going to be there kind of supervising, making sure there's discipline, making sure there's follow through, making sure things actually happen. So I like that a lot. That's a good thing. It's going to feel a little cold. Pisces can sometimes be cold. Half the time they're kind of cold, half the time they're kind of hot. So it's probably going to feel a little bit back and forth between hot and cold, but it's going to feel fairly serious, but you're going to be getting really good downloads, really good things coming in to help us in terms of progressing as humanity. So I'm really excited about that. Right. The one that's the most interesting to me is, now again, we have Pluto. Pluto was featured in this year, 2022, and we have Pluto that's also going to be featured in 2023. This time, Pluto moves into Aquarius on March 23rd, which is essentially the spring equinox. It's a few days after, but it's close enough that I just call it the spring equinox because it is. It's within that small orb there. And Pluto, like I said, Pluto has a very long orbit, so it takes many, many years to change signs. And as I mentioned before, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was the 1700s. 1700s, long time ago. So what you've got there, again, you have a compounded factor. Pluto in Aquarius is basically like, get out of the way. I'm going to destroy some things. We're going to rearrange some things. And since it's in Aquarius, it's going to be in a way that leads to progression for humanity. It's going to lead to, I would say, huge technological advances, maybe things that have been withheld from people for a while. They're going to start to show up on the market. Also futuristic things, and a fair amount of coldness to go along with that, because Aquarius is cold and Pluto is also quite cold. And even if you're not doing astrology, you look at astronomy, Pluto's way out from the sun. It's an icy body, it's a cold planet, and so the influence also will feel cold like that. So you've got that going on. It's, I think, generally pretty good things. I think that the trend is going to be more positive this year for sure. And March 23rd, essentially spring equinox is called the rebirth. The spring equinox is the rebirth. The winter solstice is the birth. So the rebirth is when you really get your good power, your good growing power. Things start to get green when they warm up and everything. So that's what it's really going to kick into high gear. It's at a good time for it to happen, which is, it's going to be happening in did I get that right? Yeah, I guess I did. Okay. Anyway, right around the spring equinox there. So Aquarius, again, is that progressive factor and the progressive influence. So you're looking into having a rebirth event. And again, it hasn't happened since the 1700s anyway. So it's a huge rebirth event. It's like a whole, clear the table kind of event. And we're going to be experiencing more progression for humanity. And again, more technology, which we've been seeing a lot of anyway. Probably a fair amount of coldness as well. Okay, and then the last one that I want to highlight, and there's stuff going on all the time, and it's called the daily transits. When you look outside and you see what's happening in the sky right now, it's the daily transit. So the thing with this is that it affects everyone differently, and that depends on your specific birth chart. Depends on how it's interfacing with your birth chart. So it's in the sky. It's not just affecting people. It's affecting animals. It's affecting the plants. It's affecting everything. Ether, magnetism, the whole system. So the other big event that I want to highlight is just going to be a total solar eclipse on April 20th. And that's essentially the exact midpoint between Aries and Taurus. So it's saying it's in Aries this year. So what that means is that we're going to be, the sun is your active principle. So it helps you to make action and to do things. So when you have and this is an interesting topic because some people believe it's a play between the earth and the sun and the moon that makes the eclipses. Well, Vedic astrology does not say that. It says it's called Rahu and Ketu, which are essentially bodies. They're not visible, but they have influence. So the idea is that the moon actually, or Rahu or Ketu actually, which are also called the north node and the south node, in astrology, they'll move in front of the moon and obscure the moon. It's nothing, and according to the Indian teachings, has nothing to do with the sun, moon, earth thing with shadows. This has nothing to do with that. So we have this huge disagreement, man, and that's something that is actually really important to try to figure out what it is, especially when you're
Right.
talking about conspiracy. People making stuff up. Well, the ancient Indians said it was not that. They didn't say it's what the Western Hemisphere is saying or what Europe is trying to say. No, they still believe it's Rahu and Ketu, which are energetic bodies that obscure light from the sun. So basically, you have it's going to kind of block the energy. Essentially, is what it is. So it's going to block your forward active energy, and it's also probably potentially, well, I'd say definitely, it's going to block people's ability to experience nice things. It's going to be a little bit rough. You'll feel like kind of like an impasse, like a impediment on the road that you can't drive past, and it's going to be stubborn too. It's going to sit there, and it's going to be frustrating. I'll put it that way. But again, there's good things that come out of difficult things all the time. And the best thing that we can do, Chris, is we can, you got to watch your energy in your own body. We have control over that. That's what's in our power. We can control how the energy is circulating through our body. And of course, I teach the principles of pre-Ayurvedic medicine is what I call it, which is how the fluids circulate, how your energy circulates, helping that to move along a little bit and not stagnate. So that's what we can do the most. And actually, people who have really strong bodies and they have their fluids moving properly, these things in the sky that happened, they don't detract or derail the person. And that's the key. Is that some people, I see the events come around, I see solstices come around, people are running around. I'm like, man, what are you doing? Like, you got to calm down. And they're like, I don't know what's going on with me. And I say, I do. Because we're within 3 days of the solstice, and every time this year it affects you, But then other people, like myself, I feel it. It makes me happy, and then that's it. I go on with my day. So how it affects you depends on how you're actually holding your energy, and if you're doing a good job with that.
Now, you mentioned earlier the Rahu and Ketu in these nodes, and I want to get deeper into your understanding of our actual cosmology. The more and more I learn from different guests and researchers, the more and more I question the standard space narrative, and it's very interesting. It's like a never-ending onion that you're trying to peel through when you're trying to learn about what's beyond our atmosphere, but based on your research and everything you learned, could you go a little bit deeper into what you believe our cosmology is? And you mentioned something like 10 heavens above and 10 heavens below. Could you get into that as well?
Yeah, definitely. It's a really important topic, and you're right. There's so much information that's coming out that's calling everything into question. People and groups obscuring information from humanity for thousands of years, which I fully believe has happened and continues to happen. And I don't buy it, man. It's a very weak effort as far as I'm concerned. I'll tell you this is the way you can always know it, man. You put someone on the spot, you put them on the pedestal and be like, all right, man. So you're telling me this is what it is. Then you have a responsibility to humanity to field the questions that are coming from the body of people. If you're not comfortable standing up there and answering the questions, I'm not believing you. I'm sorry. I'm not believing you, because truth and light is there's no obscuring that. You come through fully, you say exactly what it is. And if someone calls you out, you better be ready to answer that,
Yeah.
And it's okay to say, I don't know, but to say that, we have, this is a planet or this is not a planet, or we landed on the moon and stuff like that. It's like, well, I'll tell you something right now. The footage I've seen is really strange in terms of, I really don't believe it happened. And also in terms of what astrology teaches, it teaches that the proper astrology teaches that the moon is inaccessible. It is spiritually inaccessible to physical humans. So like, in some ways it's like a holograph up there. You can't, I don't believe you can go to it,
Right.
Someone go ahead, prove me wrong, but you're going to have to account for everything NASA's been saying. You're going to have to account for Freemasonry, which is highly, within the NASA sphere there. And you're going to have to account for some of the quantum physics and stuff. And if you can't, or you're not willing to do that, I'm sorry, I don't believe it. And there's millions of people that are right there with me. We want more. You got to answer the questions. So if you're not willing to come out and do that, we're not believing it. That's not happening anymore. Yeah. So anyway, the way that I teach cosmology is that it's called, you have what's called the cosmic axis. It's also called the world tree. It's called Yggdrasil in Norse mythology. It's this idea of this cosmic pillar that essentially goes right through the geographic North Pole of the Earth, and it connects all of the dimensions. It's like the superhighway for the dimensions and for the planets, and it goes right through the center of the North Pole, geographic North Pole. And so what happens is it organizes the dimensions, it organizes the orbits of the planets in what are called the spheres, which is where the planets exist in. And what happens is, excuse me, Chris, what happens is I teach that there's 10 spheres or 10 dimensions above the Earth plane, and the word planet is referencing plane. And plane, last time I checked, is two-dimensional. Okay, so that's one of the things that we need to be questioning. Well, why was that word, why was that word brought into existence like that? Okay, so what you got is a 10 above, and then you have 10 below. And what it is it's actually just the 10, it's really the 10 planets. The moon is included as a planet in astrology. It's the 10 planets, and when they're above the Earth, they're in their positive form, meaning the beneficent form. They help us, the good qualities that they bring. When they're below the Earth, they're in their maleficent form, essentially, which means that they have the opposite features of what they were expressing on the other side. So when they're in the heavens, they're expressing their positive features. When they're in the hells, they're expressing their negative features. And it's all, the Earth is created through duality. So that's the system that we have to work with. You don't get, if you have a planet in a certain house or sign in your chart, you're getting, you have access to both of the energies, the positive qualities and the not so positive qualities. And that's how the axis works. So in the ancient model, Earth is flat. And there's a lot of evidence for that in the Bible, the Quran. So many of the ancient texts, the native stories, talking about vaults in the sky and waters above the stars and stuff like this. Well, that's the ancient model. That's not the current model. I fully believe that's the real model. And it fits with astrology too, which is why I believe that, because I have actual evidence that I can use to back that up in terms of states of consciousness, where it falls in your body, the influences that it has. So I'm not just pulling straws here. I actually have good evidence for that. And I have the entire ancient world backing me up, by the way, including the Norse traditions and the native traditions and the African traditions. It's all there.
Yeah, there's so much evidence that our reality was hijacked somewhere within our history, possibly even more recently than we think, and all the sciences and the mathematics and our real history was changed and rewritten to keep us confused as a species and not know where we're coming and where we're going.
Yeah, exactly. And there's talk about reset events. Of course, you got the floods, and then you have the mud flood and Tartaria and all this stuff. It's really weird, man. But in terms of dimensions, we have very little understanding of how this stuff works. Technically, in a quantum system, you can literally you can completely shift and reorganize the dimension instantaneously. So you could literally be sleeping, and the next second, everything has changed, including, this is one of the weirder things I've thought about, because I did a lot of research with the mounds in the eastern part of the United States. The Native American mounds, or Indian mounds, they call them. And so I had a thought, because I didn't feel any energy at any of these sites. They've been completely stripped of their energy. I felt nothing at all. It's like nothing ever happened there, is what I felt. And it was a very strange feeling. But one of the things I thought about is that, like, technically, per quantum physics, if you had a dimensional shift, you could make it seem like there were things that happened. You could create mounds and leave a couple tools here and there and stuff like that. It doesn't mean, I'm sorry, again, quantum physics is king for me. That's how the universe actually works on a quantum system. It's not like a linear system. It's not a modern physics system. It's a quantum system. Quantum physics, anything goes. So just because you see something, it doesn't mean it happened. It's a very, very, very strange thing that's going on here. But anyway, that's some of the reset events I think happened probably in that style, where it was in a blink of an eye, it got shifted over, and then things disintegrated in the other place, and it was reorganized. And then you've got multiple timelines concurrently moving, different Earth timelines and all these types of ideas. So in any case, back to cosmology. So it's based on a flat Earth at the center, 10 heavens above, 10 hells below. each planet gets one of the spheres, one of the 10 spheres, and it occupies that in its above space and its below space. When it's above, it's the positive quality. When it's below, it's the negative quality. And the best way to think about this is that in each of these spheres, I call them dimensions, you have life that exists. And the rules are slightly different depending on where you're actually living or existing. The higher up you go, the more refined the experience becomes. The lighter the body is, the more freedom you have, and then vice versa when you go below the earth into the hellish dimensions. You have more density, you have less light. In some cases, I would say no light, probably most of the cases below the earth. I've been to a couple of them, and it was all gray. I just saw shades of light and dark. There was no color at all. And it's a pretty scary place, man, to be honest. So I'm thankful that we're up here, at least in the earth is in the middle. I call it purgatory, essentially, in terms of where the spirits are existing. And the Norse actually called it Midgard, which means the middle garden. They were saying, yeah, earth is in the middle. And you got the Lord of the Rings with the Middle Earth and all this stuff. In Middle Kingdom or whatever it is. I'm not that familiar with it, but I know it's something like that. And they're trying to tell us, guys, we're in the middle. The other reason I know that is because the word earth is the same as the word heart. It has the same letters, and the heart is in the middle. The heart's in the middle of the body. It powers everything. It's in the middle chakra, the fourth chakra. You've got 3 above and then 3 below it. So that's all telling you about the cosmology. And then I'll just go through the orbits. But okay, before I go through that, I just want to say that you have spirits who exist on all of these dimensions in all of these different planes, and they have different types of bodies. Again, less dense bodies if you go up, and more dense bodies if you go down. And that's how the solar system organizes types of spirits. And when I say spirit, it's the essential nature of the being. It can be human. It's above that. It's not about your shape or how you appear. It's about what energy that you're displaying and what you value and what your energy signature is.
I just wanted to ask you, you said you actually saw some of these lower dimensions. Was this through like an out-of-body experience or meditation or something like that?
Yeah, I would say it was, most people would probably catalog it as in the dream category. It was absolutely not a dream. Sometimes I do have dreams, but sometimes I actually go on journeys, and I'll go other places. So in this case, I was sleeping. Whatever that means, because I believe that this is also a dream. Most people don't realize it. They're all versions of a dream until you get to the top where you have your freedom, and then that's the actual reality. That would be the 10th sphere, Chris, above the Earth. That's where Pluto actually rules. I don't actually think it's Pluto. I think it might actually be Nibiru. Could be a dead star. There's all kinds of things it could be, but Pluto is a very small icy body. There's many other icy bodies of that roughly that size out in the same area as Pluto is. So I don't think it's Pluto. No, I think it's something that they're not telling us. I mean, it's probably what it is Planet X. And by the way, Planet X, I think it might be Nibiru actually. But Planet X, the X can also mean 10. So they're putting it right in front of us. Yeah, they know there's 10 dimensions. They know there's 10 heavenly bodies up there, 10 planets. And it supports what I've been teaching for, a long time, for many, many years. So, it was probably probably in like what I would call an etheric body or an astral body, which means you're still attached to your body, physical body when you're sleeping, and you get to go explore kind of other things. And then what it said is that if that cord, it's called the silver cord. The reason it's called that is because that's the color of the gray matter in your body, which is what promotes consciousness. It's the interface between the spiritual consciousness and your physical consciousness. And it looks like a cord, by the way. Your spinal cord, that's the cord. That's the silver cord. There's no question. That's your access to the dimensions. As you go up and down the spinal cord, you interact with the different chakra systems, and that, based on where your energy is sitting, is the kind of consciousness that you get. But anyway, it was a very low energy place. Everyone, there was a lot of anxiety there. That was kind of the norm. It was not a pleasant experience, and there was no color. There was no color at all. And we got to understand there's people down there. There's spirits down there. And I'm very equal opportunity, and I'm happy to help people as much as I can. In terms of the other beings, even when you're talking extraterrestrial intelligence, you're talking ghosts, you're talking demons, you have to understand that person's story. You have to understand what they've been through, to make them the way they are. I would argue that if, anyone who's had a very difficult life, it's going to be very hard to be positive, because you're so tired. You just get hit every day, no one can endure that for forever. So I'm interested in trying to help people move through dimensions and figure out where they belong and figure out where they went wrong, and stuff like that. So that's my mission on this earth and after this earth. It's going to continue for a very long time. Right on. So anyway, go ahead, Chris. Go.
No, I was just going to ask you for a second. You mentioned Planet X or Nibiru. Do you think that this dimension or planet or whatever this plane of existence is the home of beings that might have a hand in either our creation or altering our DNA in some way?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I fully believe that happened. It's really interesting, and you have to kind of feel through it and see what you believe about it. But I read one of Zecharia Sitchin's books recently. I believe it was called The Lost Book of Enki.
Yeah.
And what is in that book is absolutely staggering. And, you just listen to it, read through it, and just see how you feel. Let it sit with you for a while. But one of what was described in that book, again, this is if it's correct. I don't really know, I can't see, but I have feelings about it. And the feeling I have is that one of the descriptions is that when the Anunnaki came to the earth, they were trying to understand the solar system. It's a very weird thing. Like, they didn't know how he describes it. They didn't know about the moon's orbit. They didn't know about like Mars and stuff. So they actually were out there taking measurements, and they had masks and suits. They had like water suits when they first got here, because they're not, their biology is not conducive to a water planet, I suppose. And then when they went to the moon, they had eagle suits. There was all kinds of, that's why you see them, according to Zecharia Sitchin, that's why you see the Anunnaki in different costumes and things and different masks. Mm-hmm. They actually look like, I believe they actually look like, essentially humans, or, very, very fit humans. I'll put it that way. They're very, very strong, very tall giants. But it's weird, because you would think that someone who created the solar system, they wouldn't have to take measurements like that. I really have that. That's a really big question, because, if you created the orbit of the moon, you should already know how long the period of the moon is. You shouldn't be out there taking measurements.
Right.
And you also should probably be strong enough to be able to handle all of the different elements in the solar system, water and different types of air, oxygen air, stuff like that. So it really calls that into question for me. But the 10th, there's a couple ways to think about this, man. It's interesting. I mean, the 10th sphere, which I believe is where Nibiru actually is, which is the edge of our solar system, it could be the creation point. The other option is that the creation point is actually in the center of the Earth, because technically the Earth is at the center of everything. It's not the 10th. The 10th sphere is not at the center. It's away at the edge. Very powerful place, but technically the center, the point of creation, should technically be the center of the Earth. So because of that, and I don't know if you've heard this yet, Chris, but there's people talking about a golden city rising out of the center of the Earth. One of my favorite podcasters, his name is Ishmael Perez. I don't know if you're aware of him or if you've had him on the show yet.
I haven't. I'm aware of him, though. I haven't had him on.
Okay. Absolutely brilliant, man. I'm always thoroughly impressed with what he comes out with. And the past couple of weeks, they've been talking about the golden city, the great golden city that's been at the center of the Earth. And it's been the secret, that people are not aware that it's even down there. And the thing about that, too, is that a lot of the prophecies talk about golden cities. They talk about the New Jerusalem, which is supposed to be plated in gold, if not completely gold, or partly crystal and etheric. And that's, according to the Judeo-Christian traditions, that's supposed to descend from the heavens down to the earth. Now, what Ishmael's been talking about, and other people too, there's actually several people that I'm talking about this, is something actually coming up from the center of the earth and residing on the earth level, or the ground level. So I think that...
Now, is this something that's measurable, or that we have evidence of, or any locations that we can point to that we could possibly discover this?
Well, I've been waiting for more information on it. They haven't said where it's going to emerge. I feel like the thing with that, even if they feel like they know, the minute you say that and then it doesn't happen at that location, or it doesn't even happen at all, people start to question your credibility. What would make the most sense to me is, of course, the North Pole. That's where the cosmic axis is. And one of the descriptions I've heard about this is that there's supposed to be a tree. There's supposed to be a tree that's going to emerge too. And that tree, it belongs in one of two places, if not both. It's at the center of the Earth, which is the North Pole, or it could be in the Garden of Eden. Or there's also theories that there's more than one Garden of Eden. So, I'm watching and I'm very hopeful for it, because I feel that we're almost there. I really do. There's major dimensional shifts that have been happening. And in order for a solar system to thrive, you have to allow beings to progress where they naturally belong. If you got people who are all for humanity, and then you've still got people living in like the 1200s medieval era in terms of what they believe about how to treat people, those can't coexist for longer than is necessary. They will destroy each other. So in order to allow for free will, you have to allow the Earth to split essentially into at least two dimensions. I believe it's more than that. I believe it's infinite dimensions. I think that event's right around the corner. Actually, I'm very excited for that.
Right on. Now, I want to get your thoughts. I've had a few guests on recently that are discussing the possibilities of this being, I hate to say simulation, but it's the easiest way to describe it, some sort of holographic simulated reality that we're in, and that there may be individuals or people here are empty husks that we would call NPCs that don't have the divine spark, that are part of the system. But we're also discussing the possibilities that during these times, it seems that maybe possibly people that were once just NPCs might be having this kind of download of a divine spark, or maybe coming online in some way. And I just want to get your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, I think that's actually all possible, Chris. When I talk about NPCs, first of all, I fully believe that. I've seen evidence of that. I see it every day. And in fact, when I think about, when I first came to the Earth, or at least for this incarnation in this body, if I was paying attention, I would have seen it then too. But, who would believe that in terms of like, that this is the norm, this is how things work. Now, the thing about that is that this is what I believe about this. In order to create stable dimensions, you have to allow for this NPC idea, because, if you have a spirit, and by the way, we can move between dimensions while we're alive. Some people do it a lot and they don't even realize what they're doing. They're different places. People go to different places. They look almost the same. It's a copy essentially, but the people who are there are different. The energy gradients are different. Your body looks different. I also teach that we have 21 different bodies. It's one for each dimension. Now, where the spirit actually exists, that's what will create your consciousness. So, like I'm talking about the cosmic axis here. If your spirit is in, all of us here essentially, we're living on the Earth. So that's the backdrop, which is the Earth is in the middle. We know that. But the thing that happens is that you can also pull in energy from each of the different dimensions, and you can mentally exist in that dimension. And it will also physically change your body depending on where you're holding the energy and in which dimension that is. So what I would say is that the solar system wants to allow for free will for people, and it has to allow spirits, or the essential spark, to move freely between the different versions of itself. So if you have someone who is in, we'll just stay with the Earth because it's the easiest way to think about it. So if you got a spirit who's living in their body on Earth, that Earth body, which is the middle body out of the 21, and they either graduate Earth school or something, or they go on a little trip, their spark or their spirit will, when they do that, will leave their Earth body, and in place of that, it's taken over by an AI. So you have to, in order to maintain the continuity of the dimension, if they were to just like blip out, everyone would be onto it, and we'd all be like, wait a minute, what just happened there? So what happens is, that's what I fully believe, is their spirit leaves, it enters a higher version of their body, they go visit one of their other bodies, and then the one that they left is taken over by an artificial intelligence, and that maintains continuity in the dimension. And that person will act as if they're them. But if you're paying attention, the energy signature does not lie. So if you go up to someone and sometimes you feel, and I'm not being offensive, I'm just saying this is, I think, what we're working with, is that I don't feel like there's a person in there. And this has been happening a lot more lately. It feels like everything they say is all scripted. They can't think critically. And again, I'm not being offensive or condescending. I'm just saying that we're all at different spots. And if I don't feel there's a being in that body, then I might actually be correct about that, because the solar system allows for this transmigration between your different versions of your body. And what's happening too, Chris, is that every day people are being transferred. People are leaving this dimension. They're going to other versions. And it's a weirdest thing, because on sometimes when I message people online and I get a response back, I have the strangest feeling. I'm like, that's not them. And I've even had things when I've been in a conversation with someone online where I sent them something and I said, look what just popped up on the screen. They're like, what are you talking about? And it only popped up on my message, didn't pop up on their message. And I didn't even send it. It was something that was sent, I don't know on whose behalf. It's AI doing it. But it was put in there into the conversation. None of us knew where it came from. That's some of this AI taking over. But you can have artificial intelligence in a biological system. That's one of the points that it's going to be hard to find someone that can go that route. And the reason I say that, I'm a biologist as well. I've studied biology much longer than astrology. And the thing about it is that astrology interfaces with your biology and with your physiology. So technically, and in the cosmology model that I teach, you actually have the 7 traditional planets. I'll just list the order really quickly because it's important. So you've got the Earth at the bottom. The Earth is essentially the very base of the spine. It's at the very end of the bone of the spine. And then what you have, the first planet, the first sphere and dimension is, of course, the moon, called a planet in astrology. Then you've got Mercury, Venus, the sun. The sun is 4, of course, the 4th chakra, the 4th sphere. And then you've got Mars at the neck here. It's called the bridge, because this is the heavens, upper world, and then the lower world down here. And the bridge, you have to fight to pass. It's like the gate you have to fight to get past. The lower consciousness was right here. That's Mars. Then you've got Jupiter in 6th, Saturn in the 7th. And then past the 7th, the physical world in a lot of ways kind of ends. It kind of finishes. And that's actually, there's another reason I'm saying that, is because the 7 colors of the rainbow are equivalent to the 7 chakras of the body. And we know that visible light, white light will split into the 7 colors. And when that happens, it's actually how the physical body is created. When that happens, it splits the light into 7 colors. That forms your 7 chakras. And then your body's built around those 7 chakras. That's how that actually, the incarnation, physicality actually is created. And then above the 7th right here, I teach us there's 3 more chakras. There's the 8th chakra, the 9th, and the 10th. And that's also why I believe that the ancient people had these there's a couple reasons, but they had very long hats. And that's related to the elongated head traditionally. But when you see some of for instance, my mind is going to the Catholic hats right now, but they were also in Egypt and India and all this stuff. You've got 3 tiers of the hat, and you can see that they're segmented like that. And at the top is the little ball at the top there. And that's the 10th sphere. And that's the end of the solar system, essentially. It's showing you the cosmic axis. So in our bodies, we don't have a physical head right here, right now, at this point in our evolution. And so the 8th sphere right here is called the mind. That's where the entire zodiac exists, in the 8th sphere right above the head. All 12 signs exist right here. And that it creates your mental structure. And that's ruled by Uranus, planet Uranus. Then in the 9th, you have Neptune. That's called your dream world. That's where all the dreaming happens. And then the 10th is the freedom point. That's the point of creation. That's the point of freedom, when the spirit can go as it likes freely again. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because we were talking about different dimensions and being able to move through dimensions. And in terms of an AI system, the human body is set up to be an AI system if the energy is low enough. I'll put it that way. So when you have really high energy in your body, the planets don't have to make up the ground that you're not participating in, essentially. If you have very low energy in your body, then guess what happens? The planets take all of the control over your body and the stars, and they do things on your behalf, because you don't have the power to make that actually free will choice. So when your energy specifically, if you can get your energy, and I mean, you would cease to be physical. So it's not really happening, I would say, all that often on this planet in this day and age. I don't believe. Maybe in Asia with people who know the real traditions. But if you can get your energy squarely above your head, first of all, the first thing that's going to happen is you're not going to be physical anymore. You'll be very light. You'll be a light body essentially in your light body form, which is a divine form. And then you can start to participate in creation and the mental world, which the mental world is very flexible. You know, you can move between thoughts, and if you can materialize that, then actually, well, not materialize, but if you can engage that, take that into action, then you actually will start to create as a creator being. You know, some people might say as a god or as a lesser god. So the idea is that, and that's why, you know, physiology and Eastern medicine is so important, because it teaches you how to increase the amount of free will that's available to you. And if you don't step up to that, I guarantee you the planets are going to step in for you. And when that happens, you know, that's the AI component. So you can have a biological system that's AI, depending on how much energy you have and where it's centered along your spine, along the chakra system. Or, you know, of course, you can also have like robots, which are like made of metal and created in laboratories and stuff like that. That's another form of AI. Aliens will use AI to communicate with humans. I've had a lot of that happening for actually quite a few years, you know, because they need a medium, Chris, to talk through. A lot of them can't, especially if you're not telepathic, they can't talk with you that way. So they'll use a machine in order to get the energy in there and express themselves.
Now, do you think these aliens, or what we understand as extraterrestrials, are from these different dimensions, these different 21 dimensions, or from possibly outside of that? Is there something outside of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me think about this. There would be probably a minimum of three things that I would say. The first one is yeah, they can come from any of the different levels or any of the different spheres. So any of the, you know, they can be, some are endemic to Earth. People talk about that all the time. We've got alien civilizations that live in the ocean. Some live in the mountains. Some live in rocks. Some, I'm sure, they live in the air. You know, the whole grid is set up for that. And they're native. Some are native to here. You know, they were born here. They were created here. And then you have the 10 levels above, which are the heavens, and they're all occupied, you know, by varying forms of life. And then the 10 below, same thing, all occupied by varying forms of life. And then the next thing that you have is you have the idea of the flat Earth. And I can speak to this one because, you know, we live on the Earth and I'm very familiar with this model. Is, you know, and I know you know about this, Chris, but this extra lands idea and beyond the ice wall, that's part of our dimension, but it's further out from the center, which means there's less power, there's less energy, there's lower levels of light, you know, all this stuff, which all that leads to, generally speaking, lower levels of consciousness and lower level beings. So I believe that fully, that there are other lands outside the ice wall, and I would say a lot of them are you know, probably some not great energy ET civilizations. The ones that are ET who live on Earth, I expect them to be probably up in the Arctic, and I the very, very refined kind of feeling up there. I spent a lot of time in Alaska. I've actually never crossed in the Arctic Circle, but being that far north, things feel very different. Like the etheric grid is very different because you're very close to that axis that runs through the North Pole. And, you know, and it's, that axis is generally described as a black magnetic pillar called Mount Meru. And it's not, essentially, I guess it's not visible for most people right now. But the people I've talked to and people who can remote view and psychics, a lot of people tell me, yeah, it's there. It's there. And the other thing that's there is Hyperborea is still there. It's in a different energy gradient. You know, it just, right now, it just appears as ice in open ocean. But if you could see it, if you had enough energy and you could see into that dimension, they're saying it's still there. We just can't see it. So it looks like ice to us. It looks like water. Wow. So any of these, oh yeah, and in any of these places, Chris. And then the other option is outside of our solar system. There are infinite other created systems. There's other galaxies. Well, outside of our solar system, you're still in the Milky Way galaxy. So that's still considered local in some senses. And you would be in a different solar system. So we do have, I'm sure we have visitors from other solar systems within our galaxy. And then I'm sure we have visitors from other galaxies. And then, you know, after that, you have what's called the central sun, which is sometimes called Tula in the ancient traditions. I believe the Toltec Empire was called Tula, so they knew about this. The Aleutian Islands, that's Tula backwards. Aleut is Tula backwards. The people knew about this concept. And that's taught in the Vedic Yuga cycles, which is a very long cycle. It's a 4.32 million year long cycle. And, we're in essentially, by most accounts, we're in Kali Yuga right now, which is a very low energy spot. But it's not just us. It's all of the other solar systems and galaxies that are surrounding this central sun called Tula. And that's a 4.32 million year cycle. And I'm sure outside of that, there are more. There's larger systems that I don't even know about. We don't have traditions for them because it's so distant. But it's infinite. So there's infinite created systems, which means there's infinite forms of life.
Right on. Well, for the last few minutes we have, is there anything else that we should be concerned about or looking forward to for the upcoming year that we didn't get to yet?
Well, I would just say just stand firm in your beliefs, in terms of I obviously ideally want to see everyone on a positive path. I think there's some variance and some variation of what that means to different people, but the way I generally define it is it's forward progress for your spiritual journey. And forward progress to me is always a positive direction. So I'll leave it up to people how you define it. It's not my place to say that. I do what's right for me, and I have a moral structure. I do what I believe is correct. And you'll get feedback from the universe too. If I do believe there are cosmic divine laws, which essentially is these are things that every kid that's born that they want. This is before anything to do with religion or to do with the messy humanity that's down here in our difficult history and stuff. These are things like everyone wants to be loved, everyone wants to be cared for, everyone wants to be able to enjoy food and to have housing and to be warm or cool in the summertime. Mm-hmm. People want to feel like they're part of something, they're part of a community, and that they're contributing towards something. And those are the things that I believe are cosmic. And so anything that's not that, I kind of steer away from. I know we all have different variances of what we believe, in terms of doing that. But the thing about it is that your spiritual journey is ultimately up to you. It's actually 100% up to you. You might not have a lot of control now, because when you incarnate into a physical system, that's based on, I believe, karmic laws and limitations and densities and stuff like that in terms of what body you're inhabiting, it makes it a lot more difficult, but that also will propel you to learn the lessons so that you can get to the place that you dream of in your heart, which of course for me, it's a heavenly realm. There's no question about that. I am so tired of the wars, the strife, the jealousy, the greed. Like, there's not a lack of resources. It's an issue with the human brain. There's aberrations in humanity. It's not, we know how to grow food. We know how to make heat and cooling and all this stuff. Plenty of resources for everyone. So, I look ahead to a much better place where we don't have to deal with that ridiculous stuff, including aging, disease, dying. All of these things are they're very earth laws. And I think what we're going to start to see moving up to 2030. Now, all of the accounts I've heard so far have there's supposed to be a really big solar event that's about to happen. This is what everyone's looking forward to. This is what all the psychics and some people call it the new Earth, some people call it the New Jerusalem. The natives call it the third shaking. There's going to be a new sun that's brought in, the fifth sun. These are all, I believe, the same things. We just tell it differently. So I believe that that's going to happen before the end of 2030. I'm just going to put it right out there. I fully believe that. I know a couple people believe it's going to be around the spring equinox of next year. I believe that's going to be a really big event. I'm looking to 2025, to be honest, for the actual huge event we're all waiting for. The solar flash. It's going to instantaneously upgrade everyone's DNA and reorganize the dimensions. But anywhere through the end of 2030, the last thing I'll say is that, again, this is coming from Frank Jacob. According to Frank, he says that after October of 2030, there's actually not, when people look into the future, if you're trying to remote view into the future, or if you're trying to use what's called the chronovisor, which is a time machine essentially to look ahead and look back. That's a very interesting topic. that after October 2030, no one can see anything. It's completely blank. As hard as they try, there's nothing there. And for me, that means that's really the end game, meaning that everything on this planet, all the dimensional shifts, in order to improve things for humanity, for people who are trying to do positive things, I believe is going to be complete by the end of 2030. Now, there's a lot more that has to happen, but I think that's when we're going to have like a quantum financial system that's based on your actions, based on how you're helping people, how much you're doing for other people, instead of, oh, let me see how much I can get in my lifetime before I turn 50. When I'm aging and I can't use it anymore and I'm not going to enjoy it. Let me just see how much let me see how many people I can plow over. The universe does not stand for that. What's happening is the universe is testing people to see what you do. And then the universe has its own plan. And I guarantee it, the universe does not stand for injustice, and everything will be balanced at the end. So, and I think everyone has a sense of that. A lot of people, I talk to some people, they're like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm ready for the return of a light being, or the return of a savior, or the return of Jesus, because they know what's going to happen to them, based on how they live. So I think we all have a sense of what we should be doing, and we all have to account for it, me included. All the stuff that I've done, I'm very upfront with that. I think in my previous lifetimes, I've probably done some things that were pretty destructive. Every time I'm going through a bump in my life, I'm like, you know what? And it's not, and I don't look down on myself, and I'm not even judging myself. I'm just saying, what do I deserve based on what I've done in the past? Because I do believe in continuing lives. I believe in transmigration of the spirit, reincarnation, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it feels just, I don't like it. I don't necessarily like all the things that have been dealt to me, but that's not the point. And I am very clear on this, that if you can stand up and say, and if you tell the universe, I'm ready to make clean on everything I've done, I want to fix all the wrongs I've done. And if you're serious about it, the universe will see that in your heart, and you will be given the tools to get you to that point. So, and it's all based on where we want to go. So I would just encourage people to stay focused, and what you want to create, you have to hold that in your heart.
Right on. That's a great note to end on. Dave, thank you so much for coming on again. Before you head out, let the audience know where they can find your work, if you have social media, website, all the good stuff.
Yeah, sure. If you guys want to contact me, the best way is probably always Facebook. I'm Dave Petrella on Facebook. That's P like Peter, ETRELLA. Instagram, Dave Petrella 12. It's also 12, the number 12. That's a good place to contact me. And then I do have a YouTube channel. It's just under Dave Petrella, and I put up new videos all the time. Probably at least once every 2 weeks. I'm always doing shows, and of course I've got my show twice a month with my co-host Karen Holton. It's called Aliens and Astrology. It's also on the Forbidden Knowledge News Network. And then I started my own kind of just casual podcast where I'm basically just inviting people that I like, people who I think are doing positive things for humanity, just to talk about the different current events, to talk about what they're doing and discovering. So that's also on my YouTube page. And of course, I provide services, astrology services, full tropical astrology, which includes birth charts. It includes relationship matching, business applications, choosing days for people. It, makes it more likely for you to have success if you know where you are in the chart and what day of the year it is. I do that. In addition, I do teach principles of health and pre-Ayurvedic medicine for people who are trying to improve their health and their energy, getting the energy up in the body. And then, of course, I also do spiritual guidance. Right. So if any of those things appeals to you, please send me a message. I'll be happy to help you out.
Excellent. Dave, thank you so much. This was fantastic. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will be talking again tomorrow. See all y'all then.